So today is week 11, and we're going to start to set up our full stack application. So I'm going to, let's see, how do I want to do this? First, I'm going to open up a command prompt. And I'll go to my root folder where we've been creating all the applications, the Express generator. So the way we're going to set this up is we're going to use the Express generator to set up the server end of things. And then we're going to use the Angular CLI inside. We'll create a client folder. So the Angular app will basically live inside of the Express app. But we'll kind of divide it up into client and server ends. So I'm going to go into my root node folder. So this is where we've been creating everything. So I'm going to use Express. And I'll call this F2019 mean SPA. So Mongo Express, Angular, and Node. SPA, short for single page application. So this is a really common use for this full stack. And I'll put in minus HBS. We're not really going to use the handlebars the templating engine doesn't matter because we're going to replace the front end. We're not going to use our HBS templates. We're going to use HTML and Angular for our front end anyway. So the template engine here is not really important, but we've used HBS all along, so I'll use it again. So Express, I can turn this down. Express, the name of your app, minus HBS. You can call your app anything you like.
What's going to be related about? Yeah.
We're going to rebuild our task manager. So we're going to still use the same database and model we've already used, but we're rebuilding it as a single page app with an Angular front end. So right now we have 3 different views, right? We've got the index that displays the list of tasks, and then we have forms for adding and editing. We're going to do it all on one page. And as soon as we add a new task, it automatically gets added to the list. The list just automatically populates. There's no refresh. We delete, the list just updates. We update one. So everything happens in real time. We kind of saw with our little example last week, right? When we clicked one, we modified the form, and up above it would change. It was bound to the same data. So we're going to do that all in one page where we can do create, read, update, delete. So that's why it's called the SPA single page application. But we'll just use the same, we're not going to create a different model. We'll basically rebuild what we've got. So the generator will create our new project, and then it wants us to run the command cd app name and then do npm install. So enter the directory and then install the dependencies. So I'll change directories, go inside my app, and then I can do npm I or npm install. I think there's actually been an update to npm itself. So you may get a prompt that you can update your npm, which you can do if you like. I had this issue as well yesterday, which annoyed me. Reinstall the Express generator globally. So do npm I express-generator -G. Sure. So Express, give your app a name, -HBS. Noah, let me know if that works. I don't know why. I had the same exact problem. that I've already installed the generator globally and it wouldn't recognize my express command, so I had to reinstall the generator. Okay, so
Have you opened the administrator command prompt?
you type CMD and then you right click it and choose run as administrator. Okay, if it says Express is not recognized, reinstall the Express dash generator with the -G flag. So npmi Express dash generator -G. And then you should be able to run the Express command. I don't know why, so this seems to be a common issue. I know we've been using the Express generator all semester. You guys used it in your assignments. And I've had the same issue where suddenly it wouldn't recognize my Express commands. So I just reinstalled the generator. Sorry?
You keep getting NPM telling you there's high severity vulnerabilities, even though when you actually look at.
Yes, because here's the issue. The vulnerability that it keeps reporting, it's in, well, here's the odd thing. It's kind of weird. It reports the vulnerability in the HBS package. Yet when we look at package.json, our version of HBS is greater than the vulnerability. Like the vulnerability is reported in like version 3, and it'll say we have HBS 4. So why do we still get the vulnerability? Because inside of, we're also installing handlebars. The problem is handlebars has a dependency on HBS. And when you install handlebars, it's installing an older vulnerable version of HBS inside. So our root dependency has the newer version of HBS, but our handlebars dependency has an older version of HBS, and that's what's throwing those errors. Yeah. Right. So yeah, if we look, right, well, I'm not even going to bother running the audit fix because we know it's not going to update it. If we just run npm audit, so see, here's the issue. It's the same problem. The problem is, so it says, it is in handlebars and it's patched in, it is. So I'm just going to open my project now in, so we can look at the package.json. So I'm going to open my new project. If Express doesn't work, you need to reinstall the generator globally, and then it will work. And I'm just trying to figure out where my project is. I've clicked, it's weird, I've clicked refresh a bunch of times. I'll just close WebStorm entirely and open it back up. Yeah, it has to be express-generator. So I'll see if I can find my project now. Normally refresh does work. Okay, it's here now. So we can look at the advisory. It's the same package that's throwing all these audit warnings. If I look at package.json, okay, so it doesn't actually have handlebars directly. So the issue is handlebars is, sorry, I kind of had this backwards. It's the opposite. It's saying that the handlebars dependency that gets installed underneath HBS is out of date. It's not very helpful with their advisories. Refresh this. So we can try to update handlebars. Let's see, if we try to update handlebars, we can see if this might fix anything. I'll run npm audit again. That still doesn't help us. Okay, we may have to come back to this. Because the problem is the version of handlebars that HBS installs, that's where the vulnerability is. So it's a sub package. We'll maybe come back to this. Well, here's the advisory, and when I go there, yeah, denial of service. That could be, yes. So there's three. So this one's moderate, but yeah, there's three. There's also this prototype pollution. So it says it's patched. The problem is handlebars installs an older version. Sorry, HBS installs an older version of handlebars, and even us trying to update handlebars. Maybe we can update the subdependence. I'm not sure. I think there's a check update, so we can try that. We can try npm update. All right, we'll maybe have to come back to this one. So we're going to do a few things here. First thing we're going to do, once we've got, does everybody have the Express generator worked? I know a lot of people had to reinstall it and you got your app. Okay, first thing let's do is let's right-click our root and let's create two directories. We're going to create a client and a server directory. So we can separate out the Node and Express backend from our Angular front end. So I'm going to create a directory called client. Just the server directory. I apologize. We're going to use Angular's CLI to generate the client folder. And then I'm going to rename my roots folder to controllers. So I'm going to refactor it. Personally, I hate the name roots. I prefer the name controllers. And then I'm going to drag controllers inside of my server folder and let my code editor refactor all the paths. So controllers is now inside. You don't have to rename it. If you like the name roots, keep it. But it contains controller files. I prefer the descriptive name of controllers. I then want to copy a couple of other things from our, not from last week's class, but from our CRUD, our task manager app we finished in week 9. The two things we want, so we don't have to reinvent them, is I want the config folder that has our DB file and our DB connection. I also want our models folder that has our task model. So I'll just go in my operating system. Yeah, well, we'll just copy it. So I'm going to go back to my lesson 9, my task manager. And I'm going to copy the config and the models folders. I'm going to copy config to the root, and models I'll then drag into the server folder. So just copy both of those. So I'll paste them both in here. I'm going to leave config in the root, but I'm going to move models inside of server. So now I have this. This is the structure. Our config folder's in the root with our globals file, and server has both controllers and models. And we have one model. We just have, actually, we have a task, and we don't really need the user model. We're just going to work with the task model. Our app, we're not using any authentication for today. Everything's just going to be public. Pardon? Because we're going to need some configuration values in the client as well. We're going to use it for both the server and the client end of things. I mean, you could. It would just be a different path in the client, but I'm going to keep it in the root because it's shared among both. Now we have a model here. We've got a database connection. We have a model. Our application is not connected to the database yet, so we're going to need to install Mongoose as well. So we'll run npm I Mongoose, and then we can add our database connection into our app.js. So as soon as our server starts, it connects to MongoDB. So install Mongoose. Which message? Yes, it is very satisfying. So it'll add Mongoose. And then in app.js, we can add our DB connection. We've already got the connection code in our other task manager. I'm just going to go and lift the code right out of app.js for doing the connection. I guess we want our so we'll point to our config.globals. So we can call mongoose.connect. I'm just going to check my syntax from a callback here and written this code for a little while. Right, we need this. So we've got to set new URL parser to true. We're using the new URL parser and the unified topology, and we'll either log that we're connected, or else we'll catch any errors and log the database connection error. So I think that's actually most of our setup on the server end. We should be able to run the app now. You can copy this, or you can copy and paste it out of your task manager app.js. So I'm going to use NodeMon. And then we should be able to, so we're connected. There's our little satisfying message in white. We're connected to Mongo. So we should be able to hit localhost 3000 and just get the Express template page. So our app's running, we're connected. So for those of you just tuning in, you want to create a new application with the Express generator. We copied our model and config folders from our task manager, and we've copied the database kit. We've installed Mongoose and copied the database connection. So there's your catch-up work when your machine's boot. So with our initial task manager application, we basically had 4 layers to it. We had, just put them up here. So our original you can see what we've done and where we're going. On the back end, right, we had MongoDB. We had Node for our model and controller. We had Express that handled the server and the routing. And then we had ATS use. So we were able to build our whole app. You guys just, the assignments you submitted, this is basically the layers that we had. So Mongo on the back end, Node and Express doing the M and the C, the logic and the data modeling, and then we had HPS on the front end with Express handling all of the HTTP. Here's what this is going to look like as a mean stack application. The end product is going to be better for users, going to be more work for us. We still have Mongo. But this time our controller is simply going to be a JSON API. So all the controller is going to do is send and receive JSON. There's not going to be any calls to the front end like we have a res.render statements in our original controller. Each method would redirect or load a view. Once we use this model, the controller is totally divorced from the front end. It has no idea what's making the call or what kind of representation or presentation the end user gets. It's just an in and out service for JSON data. We'll still have Express be the server and handle the routes. Let's do it this way. At the front, we've got HTML views. So like we did last week, our front end is actually going to be HTML. But those HTML files will contain Angular code. Angular will contain Angular logic and markup. So in between, we have these two new layers. We've got to build both of them. So layer 4 is going to make the calls to our API, and this is going to be an Angular service. So this is the bridge. The Angular service is in effect the bridge between the client end and the back end. And then we need another bridge between the service and the Angular front end. That's going to be our Angular component. Technically, we don't have to do this in 2 layers. We could do it in 1. It's strongly discouraged. And the reason is the code can get complicated. So it's advisable to break it into separate layers. So that would mean, for example, if we have a call to go and get a single task, before, all we had it was one get method here in the controller. Get method talked to the data, used the model to talk to the database, and it just returned some data to the view. In this case, to go and get a single task, we're actually going to have 3 versions of the method, 1 in each layer, which might seem like overkill from a code perspective, but architecturally, this is how we're advised to structure it. So we're going to have a get task method in each one of these. Our server API, our Angular service, and our Angular component. So the code is very modular. Okay, but it helps us. So this stuff is the client. And this stuff is the server. Before we only had a single client layer. Yeah. So most of the app, originally, most of what we've done so far is server, whereas we're going to have just as much code on the client end, probably more code on the client end now. No, the point was to have a unified JavaScript stack because you could not write JavaScript on the server, and also to allow asynchronous code to run with HTTP. Those were the 2 reasons it was created, actually.
Seems like you're adding a bunch.
You're adding more work on the back end. It's more work on the back end to create a better user experience on the front end. Again, you don't have to divide the Angular component and service, but that's the recommended practice. And you'll see those components get big quickly. And because they've got to interact with both the server API as well as the front end UI, it becomes messy to try and do both in one file. Pardon?
Both run client side and browser?
Neither of them, only the views run client side. They're client side, but only this is browse. Only this is in the browser. They're client side code, but you don't see it in the browser. Angular hides it. Yes, but not in the browser, not visible in a browser. So you don't need any server to run it. Okay, so we've set up our server. Actually, the one other thing we're missing here is we don't have a task controller. So we're going to rebuild the task controller. So I'm going to make a new JavaScript file in my controller, call it tasks plural. So some of the code will be the same as in the controller we already wrote. We're still going to need express. We're going to instantiate an express router. So these lines are identical. If we look at the scaffolded controllers, same thing. Require express, instantiate the router, and then at the bottom, make public. So we'll export the router object. And that's going to go down at the bottom. So these three lines would be identical to any other controller. One's the generator scaffolds, as well as whatever controllers we manually created. So the controllers you guys have in your assignments, they're going to have those two lines at the top and that line at the bottom. It's all the same. We also need to reference our model class. Our model task uses Mongoose, so it has baked in methods like find, update, save, remove. So now we want to put in our primary root. So we'll do router.get just at the root. So if you think about our task manager before, if we went to localhost 3000/task, what happened to that URL? Let's look. If Heroku will be so kind as to load it, our task app. Right, so if I log in, let's do this here. I can sign in with Google, hopefully. Right, so here's our URL, /tasks. So we want basically our server to do the same. What kind of data operation is happening here? Create, read, update, or delete? Read. Are we reading all or are we reading one? Yeah, we're reading all. So we want, an API version of this. We're not going to render a view. We just want to do the same kind of data operation. So here, in here, we still have our callback. We want to return all tasks. So we call task.find. We're either going to get back an error or a list of tasks. Don't mind me, I'm just going to stand up here and bleed as I teach. I'll just grow a beard and this won't be a problem anymore. So if we get an error, so all our responses are going to be JSON. So we're going to return. We're going to send a response that includes the error. And then we can also attach to it an HTTP status code. It's kind of useful. So let's just go here. We've got this very handy reference of HTTP statuses. If somebody makes a call to our API, they try to get everything and we have an error, we can choose 418. Okay, we could send 418. So these are standards. So we could send 418 or what other code would maybe make sense? Sorry? So maybe I'll use, in this case, a 400, a bad request. So if we can't fulfill the request, so all the 200s are okay. So we'll give them a 400. That's if we get an error. Otherwise, we're going to return a response in JSON format. So we're going to, you haven't used this before, we're going to call res.json. And we want to send back our task list. We can also send back an HTTP status code. What code would make sense if you go back to that list at http://statuscodes.com? So someone's requesting data, and we are able to, our API is able to properly fulfill that request and return the data. So we could look, we probably want to look in the 200s. Yeah. Yeah, probably we want to. Accepted typically will mean data's coming in. So I think we'll use this one. Data has been request has been accepted for processing. So and it's intentionally non-committal. So I think maybe 200 is good. Just the generic HTTP, okay. So we'll save that. Now we can go try this out in our, actually we need to do one more thing. And what's it complaining about here? Oh, I'm missing a bracket, sorry. And then we need another row bracket down there. So if we go to our browser and now try localhost 3000/tasks, what do you expect will happen and why? Why will we get an error, Nick? You're right, we will. Right, because we haven't set up any URL. We haven't said what should happen at localhost 3000/tasks. So if we go back here and I try it, right, we get not found because our app.js is not configured to map any requests to this controller yet. So we need to set up that URL mapping. So in app.js, we're going to add this call. I'm going to say our tasks controller. So we're going to link to our controller. I know the generator calls these variables routers. I'm going to call my controller because that's what it is. And then we need to map the paths. Any requests that start with the URL/tasks will get handled by our task controller. So that's down here. Here's the URL mapping. Yep. So where index router and user router are declared, declare our task controller or task router. And then we need to map requests to that controller. So we added line 9, reference to our controller, and I added line 40 that points those URL paths to that controller as well. So if I refresh now, we now get a JSON representation of our table. Now, yours may not look like this. Yours may look something like this, depending on what browser you're using. If I try this in Chrome, I'll show you how to get it to look nicer. So this is the default in Chrome. In Firefox, what I added was an extension. So under add-ons, I added this extension. So you can search, if you're using Firefox, I use this REST client extension. And what that does is gives me options. When I have JSON data, I can also, it normally shows it this way. Shows me the header. So I have the option to kind of see all the nesting. In Chrome, there's a different extension, which I used to have, and I guess I don't. So let's just look for Chrome JSON extension. I thought I had here. Here, there's one called JSON Formatter. There's a lot of them. So if I add just search for the most. Common. So I'll add one of these. So if I add that extension to Chrome, so I don't know if I have to restart my browser, I might, right? So now Chrome's got a similar tool. Yeah, I use the Json Viewer. And it's also neat because you can contract the data. You know, I can look at a single node if I want. Just helpful. Still got the option to go to raw if you want to just see the plain text. So helpful when we're working with APIs that we have access. We can look at our data. We can format it better with one of these extensions. All right, so our server end is basically done. The only other things we'll have to do in our controller is write our other 4 or 5 methods. We need a method to get a single task, and then we need methods for adding, editing, and deleting tasks. That's really the end of the server piece. Everything else happens on the front end with Angular. We're going to take a break in a minute. I'm going to continue to bleed for the next hour or two. It's always fun. I did, and then it bled for about an hour this morning, and then I managed to accidentally scratch it about 10 minutes ago. So I've got another good like 50 minutes worth of bleeding to do. They can take pictures of you guys, not me, for the Lakehead marketing material. That's right. Maybe I can grow a beard in the next hour. Okay. Does anybody have questions about anything we've done so far? Okay. All right. So we'll take a break here. I will push what we've got done so far to Git. I got to make a new repository for this, and we'll carry on after the break. Marketing department should be here soon.